Representative Glover offers up one-page set of amendments 4784.
Representative Glover on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Members, I don't know anyone who is actually for abortion. I guess there may be some folks out there who may have some ties or some relationships that actually make them for abortion, but I don't know any of those folks. But I am for a woman's right to exercise agency over her body. I am for a woman's right to privacy. I also believe that if men could get pregnant, you'd be able to get an abortion at the barbershop along with a shave and a fresh haircut. Having said that, I know that there are changes that are coming, potentially. Those changes will limit what has heretofore been almost 50 years worth of settled law with regard to a woman's right to exercise her privacy in this regard. If that is going to come to an end, then, members, I believe that there should be at least 2 exceptions that should be afforded to women in the state of Louisiana. That one exception, or one of those 2 exceptions, should be in the case of incest, and the other case should be in the event of a rape. That's what the amendment does, and I would ask your favorable passage and would certainly entertain any questions that any of you might have.
There are no questions on the amendment. Is there any objection to the adoption of the amendment? Representative Emerson, on your objection.
Members, this one's tough. It's very tough. I think we all know that in here. The circumstances surrounding this are horrific, and I don't think there's anybody in here who would debate that. At the end of the day, the child is innocent in this situation. But I do realize there's no great outcomes, but the child is innocent in this situation. And actually, that's all I'm going to say about it, because I have something to read from Representative Pat Moore. She's been my roommate for 3 years, and you all know why she's not here right now. And you all know where she stands on this, because in her first session here, she came up to this well and she told us a very heartbreaking story, but also a joyful end to the story of her being here in front of us. And I spoke to her this morning on my drive here for about 30 minutes, and you've all had discussions with Representative Moore, and I was certainly extremely uplifted after it, especially 30 minutes of it. She was incredibly encouraging, and I really appreciate her, and I asked her permission to share this. I just want you all to know that, and she absolutely gave me her blessing to do that. So this testimony she gave in 2019, I know a lot of you weren't here, and I'm just going to read it exactly as she said it. I listened to the video, and I wrote everything down, and then I'm just going to add a quick little thing from her at the end. So I apologize, but as Representative Duplessis pointed out, this is a monumental thing. And so if you'll indulge me for a few minutes, I want to read from her. 61 years ago, my mother, at the age of 14, gave birth to me. Back in 1958, you did not bring a child into this world out of wedlock, and this was not my mother's intent. And the father told my mother that when she told him that she was pregnant, just have an abortion. And it was really just devastating. To make a long story short, my mother went ahead and brought me into this world, and she could not take care of me because her little body was so little. But she gave me to my great-grandmother, and my great-grandmother took care of me. And now I'm standing in front of you all. I understand this amendment, and I hate to think if you were rape or incest, and my mother did not consent to this, that she had to go ahead and give birth to me. But I do know this, for a long period of time as a little child, I would see my biological mother. I used to look in her eyes and think she hated my guts. And for a long time, I thought that until she told me she loved me. And her life was upside down. She didn't get a chance to do some of the things she wanted to do. Some people in our family and in our church distanced themselves from her. So she went through something. But she went ahead and brought me into this world. And right before she died, she was in a deep coma, so the doctor told us to say our goodbyes. And the only thing I could tell her was that I was so glad that she allowed me to come into this world. I don't know if she heard me, but I think she did because a tear came down her cheek. I know it's not easy. I know it's not easy if somebody had been raped. She gave me up to my great-grandmother, and I'm here in front of you all today. And I'm trying to figure out why the Lord has let me come so far. I just wanted to share this with you. Regardless of what decision you make, just search your heart. It's hard for me, but I will vote against this amendment because she brought me into this world. I asked Miss Pat if I could read that. She said absolutely yes. She said she had been praying over the weekend because she knew this bill was coming up. And she said she's really struggled, but she knows that her mother had courage and brought her into this world, and she knows that she had a purpose, and she knows that every child that is born this way does have a purpose. So again, I understand these circumstances are horrific, and it's not easy for me to stand up here and do this either, but I think that Miss Pat said it best, and she's with us today because of that. So I would ask you to stand against this amendment and give those children a chance at life.
Representative Marcel, is your question for Representative Emerson? Yeah, Representative Emerson, will you take a question? Representative Marcel.
Thank you, Representative Emerson. Yes, I was here when Representative Moore got up and told us that heart-wrenching story of how she came about. What was interesting to me, is that was a decision that her mother made. And so for me, it is a tough conversation, but you talk about the 62% of Louisianians who support abortion, but what percentage of those 60...
They supported the amendment to not have abortion.
This amendment, what percentage of the people in Louisiana would support this amendment to not include incest and rape? And that's the question. And for me, it's not tough to say that decision should be left with the mother or the person who's experiencing that, because you don't know all of the ramifications around the incest or around the rape. And so for me, I stand in support of this amendment because it leaves that decision with the mother, and God forbid if it's a child. She was 14, but it could be 11, 12 years old. And I think that decision should lie with the parents. Thank you. And thank you for this amendment, Representative Glover.
Thank you,
If I can respond
to
the did you know question. I know that's how you feel, and I respect you very much. And I know this is a hard decision for a lot of people in here. But for me, it's also, I try to be consistent in things I do here, and I do believe that this is consistent with supporting life in this way. So I would ask that you support this amendment. Oppose this amendment with me.
Representative McCormick, is your question for Representative Emerson? Yes. Representative Emerson.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Representative Emerson, I don't have the page in line. You have to excuse me. But when reading through the bill, I did notice where the doctor, maybe you can help me point out.
Is this on the amendment or the bill, Representative McCormick?
It's on the amendment.
Okay.
But it actually allows a doctor to prescribe medication to end a pregnancy if the woman has not had a positive pregnancy test. Isn't that true?
Let me pull up the amendment real quick. I'm sorry.
And I guess my point is, I think in the case of rape, that's immediately reported that medication can be prescribed to end that pregnancy.
I believe you're referring to Plan B and emergency contraceptives.
Yeah,
and
I don't
there's
know if
nothing in this bill that prohibits that.
Right, that's right. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
No
Representative.
more questions.
She waives further questions. There was one more question on the amendment. Representative Glover, to close on your amendment. Representative Phelps, was your question for Representative Glover? Oh, Representative Glover, she did have the floor. I apologize. I thought it was a question. Representative Phelps for the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Representative Glover, for bringing the amendment. And I wasn't going to speak today. Definitely didn't want to come to the floor, but there has been much question about an amendment for exceptions. I don't know if Representative Emerson has children or not. Those of you who do, I cannot imagine my daughter being raped at the age of 11, 15, 20, 25, or at any age. And I'm going back to the comments of Representative Marcel. If my voice starts to tremble, I'm just as passionate about life as well, but I'm thinking about the trauma that a woman goes through already of trying to bear a child from a loved one, much less violation of someone that intruded on her life and her privacy and her body. It's never happened to me, but I am a woman that I believe that is probably the worst thing that could happen to a woman, with the exceptions that were given of incest or rape. And we sit in this building all the time. We're here to represent people, situations, different circumstances. I'm not pro-abortion. I'm pro-life. But again, where do exceptions come? Are we really saying here in the state of Louisiana, oh, it's a hard decision to make, but this child should have to bear a child and mentally try to keep herself healthy to bring a child into this world? Is that where we are? The amendment that has been talked on the floor has been for such this. I didn't know who was going to bring it. But I have a hard time thinking, oh, it's a tough conversation, but I oppose it. It's a tough conversation, but I'm asking you not to consider other people's less fortunate incidents. Before I go anywhere else mentally, emotionally, I'm just going to ask you to consider if it were your daughter or any female in your family loved one. And I ask you to support this amendment.
Representative Glover to close on your amendment. Representative Duplessis, you had a question for Representative Glover? Representative Glover, you take a question?
Yes.
Representative Duplessis.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Representative Glover, I too want to thank you for bringing this amendment. I just had a question because earlier it was cited that I think 62% of voters voted for that recent amendment. Did you know that the majority of Louisianians support this exception?
I am aware of that. I don't know the exact percentage, but to my understanding, it is pretty substantial.
Okay, I have here that 59% strongly support an exception for rape and incest. Overall, we're looking at well up probably into the 70s, strongly support or somewhat support abortion rights in the case of rape or incest. Would you disagree with those numbers?
I could not. That's why I feel compelled to offer the amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Duplessis.
Thank you, Representative
Vice Chair.
Duplessis. No more questions on the amendments. Representative Glover to close on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Thank you, members, for the opportunity to be able to have this discussion. I feel it, the need to offer at least some response with regard to our wonderful friend and colleague, Representative Moore. I love her as much as each of you within this chamber. Over the time that she has been here, I've come to see her as a friend, as an example of courage and determination. And at this difficult time that she's in the midst of with regard to her husband, I pray for her like I know probably each and every one of you on a daily basis. And I am touched by her story, just like each and every one of you are. However, I would believe that I would be remiss if I did not at least point out a couple of things. Number one, in 1958, when Representative Moore's mother became impregnated at the age of 14, she didn't have a choice, at least not a legal one, and not a medically safe one, because 1958 was still 15 years prior to the 1973 Roe decision. And so the only option that Representative Moore's mother could have availed herself of in 1958 as a young 14-year-old, I'm assuming probably economically poor teenager in northern Louisiana, would be an option that unfortunately I am fearful is going to return in great numbers if not only this bill is passed, but the Supreme Court does what it is that we all appear to anticipate that they will do, and that is avail themselves of the illegal and medically unsafe and medically unsupervised and non-medical doctor conducted abortion. That's the only way that could have happened in 1958. And so while I'm glad her mother chose not to avail herself of that option and gave us all the opportunity to be able to behold the blessing of Representative Moore, just as I said earlier, this is something that I think should be left up to the individual woman to decide in counsel with her God, her family, whoever it is that constitutes the bubble of privacy that she believes is her own. Because absent this amendment, in these two instances, young girls who will find themselves the victim of incest and rape will have to find themselves in the very same shoes that Representative Moore's mother was in. And while we know the great outcome of Representative Moore's mother, I can assure you, and if you're honest with yourselves, you know that there are example after example of young girls in 1958 who chose the other option. Some of those folks were lucky enough to survive those procedures. Unfortunately, some of them were not. And so I'm asking you, let us not return back to the days of back alley, illegal abortions in general. Because I am against the bill. I won't sit here and be intellectually dishonest with you and tell you that I will vote for this bill if this amendment ends up on it. I still think it's a bad bill, but at the very least, let us give those who have been raped or the victims of incest access to a medically safe and legal option. With that, I ask for your affirmative vote.
Representative Glover offers an amendment which Representative Emerson objects to. All those in favor of the amendment will vote yea. All opposed will vote nay. The clerk will open the machine. Huval, nay. Desatel, nay. Boyer, nay. Mike Johnson, nay. Members, are you through voting? Clerk will close the machine. 37 yeas, 62 nays, and the amendment fails to be adopted. Back on the, well.
Representative Hughes for personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'll be very brief. You know, these abortion bills can be deeply emotional, and it's easy for things to become deeply contentious. But despite what side of the coin you fall on, I just wanted to sincerely thank Representative Emerson for setting the tone and a gold standard of civility. She took every question she could have easily waived. She did not walk away. She was extremely respectful, and Representative Schlegel as well. And I just want to sincerely thank you for realizing that civil discourse truly is the hallmark of democracy, and that respect still has a place. Thank you.
Representative Boyd for personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the vote is over, but I did want to express to you my concerns about incest and rape not being an exception to that bill. Many of you have daughters, granddaughters, nieces, cousins that are 9 years old that become young ladies. If they're a victim to incest or rape and become pregnant, you want a 9-year-old child whose average weight is about 60 pounds to carry a child, to experience gestational diabetes, preeclampsia, to experience possible postpartum depression. We have not done anybody any justice by passing that bill without those exceptions. Thank you.